Welcome and thank you for joining us. Your support means the world. Quick question. Where are you listening from today? Which city? Which country? Drop it below. Now, let's dive into today's story. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vertex Technologies' executive floor. Alfredo Davidson's corner office, with its panoramic view of the city skyline, felt smaller than usual as he hunched over his laptop, scanning through acquisition reports. The screen's blue light reflected off his wire-rimmed glasses, highlighting the slight creases around his eyes, battle scars from 15 years of corporate warfare. A notification popped up on his screen. Board meeting rescheduled, next week. Alfredo's finger hovered over the mouse, a slight tremor betraying his otherwise composed exterior. As Executive Vice President of Operations, he'd been preparing for this moment his entire career. Harold Gillespie's retirement announcement last month had set everything in motion, and the upcoming vote was supposed to be a mere formality. The soft click of heels against marble flooring drew his attention. Penny Carson appeared in his doorway, her gray blazer as pristine as always, a thick manila folder clutched against her chest. After 8 years as his assistant, she developed an uncanny ability to read his moods. The quarterly numbers from marketing just came in, Penny said, placing the folder on his mahogany desk. She hesitated, her usually steady hands fidgeting with her pearl necklace. Sir, about the board meeting being moved up? Alfredo leaned back in his chair, studying her expression. What aren't you telling me, Penny? She glanced over her shoulder before closing the office door. There's talk. Wilson French has been having private meetings with board members. Jennifer McGrath and Bradley Fletcher were seen having dinner with him at Loose Cirque last night. The name sent an involuntary chill down Alfredo's spine. Wilson French, marketing's golden boy, with his perfectly tailored suits and Harvard MBA, had been making waves since joining the company 18 months ago. Wilson's ambitious, Alfredo said, keeping his voice neutral. It's natural he'd want to network with the board. Sir, Penny's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He's not just networking. He's making a play for your position. Before Alfredo could respond, a familiar figure passed by his office. Jasmine Fisher, his wife of 8 years and marketing director, walked past without so much as a glance his way. Her stilettos clicked against the floor, each step purposeful, her designer suit hugging her frame in a way that drew attention from a junior executive walking by. Mrs. Davidson seems preoccupied lately, Penny observed carefully. Alfredo's jaw tightened. That'll be all, Penny. Thank you. Once alone, he opened his bottom desk drawer, pulling out a framed ultrasound photo. The image was grainy, dated exactly 1 year ago. Their baby, their future, lost in the 3rd month. Jasmine had withdrawn after that, throwing herself into work, their home becoming a hollow space filled with awkward silences and separate dinners. His phone buzzed, a text from Jasmine, working late. Don't wait up. The drive home that evening felt longer than usual. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and purple, but Alfredo barely noticed, his mind replaying every recent interaction with Wilson French. The subtle interruptions in meetings, the questioning of his strategies, the way he'd positioned himself as an innovative alternative to Alfredo's traditional approach. The house was dark when he arrived, save for a light in their bedroom. As he climbed the stairs, the sound of drawers opening and closing echoed through the hallway. He found Jasmine in their walk-in closet, methodically packing items into her weekend bag, the Prada overnight case he'd given her for their last anniversary. Going somewhere? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Jasmine didn't turn around, continuing to fold a silk blouse with precise movements. Out of town for the weekend? Business trip? No. She finally faced him, her expression devoid of the warmth that had once made him fall in love with her. Personal trip? With Wilson French? The question hung in the air like smoke. Jasmine's laugh was cold, brittle. You always were good at connecting dots, Alfredo. That's what made you successful at work. But you can't control who I sleep with anymore. The words hit him like physical blows, but he maintained his composure. How long? Does it matter? She zipped the bag closed with a decisive motion. This marriage is just paper now. Has been since. She trailed off, one hand unconsciously touching her stomach before dropping away. Wilson's taking me to his beach house. We'll be gone until Sunday night. The doorbell chimed downstairs, its cheerful tone incongruous with the moment. Jasmine brushed past him, bag in hand. Alfredo followed her down the stairs, watching as she opened the front door to reveal Wilson French, leaning against the doorframe with casual arrogance. Wilson's smirk widened as he saw Alfredo. His charcoal suit was perfectly pressed, his copper hair styled just so. He looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury magazine ad. "Alfredo, hope you don't mind me borrowing your wife for the weekend." His arm snaked around Jasmine's waist possessively. "We'll be spending some wild nights at my little getaway. You understand, don't you? Sometimes a woman needs different opportunities." The double meaning wasn't lost on Alfredo. He watched them walk to Wilson's Tesla Model S, noting how Jasmine didn't look back once. The car's electric were faded into the night, leaving him alone in the doorway of his empty house. Inside his home office, Alfredo poured himself 2 fingers of scotch but didn't drink it. Instead, he pulled up his laptop and began working, the hours ticking by until dawn began to paint the sky in shades of gray. Saturday morning arrived with the soft patter of rain against windows. Alfredo had just finished his 3rd cup of coffee when his doorbell rang. Penny Carson stood on his porch, holding a waterproof portfolio case and wearing an expression that meant business. "Sir, I apologize for coming to your home, but this couldn't wait until Monday." She followed him to his home office, her practical shoes leaving wet prints on the hardwood floor. "I've been gathering information for months. Ever since Wilson French started showing unusual interest in your quarterly reports." She opened the portfolio, spreading documents across his desk. Emails printed on company letterhead, surveillance photos, meeting minutes, and financial reports created a paper trail of betrayal. "Wilson's been planning this since he joined the company," Penny explained, pointing to dates on various documents. "He and Mrs. Davidson. They've been working together to undermine your position. Look at these project reports. They've been manipulating data, taking credit for your strategic initiatives, and building a case for Wilson to take the CEO position." Alfredo examined a particularly damning email chain between Wilson and Jennifer McGrath, the youngest board member. "They've been thorough, but not thorough enough." Penny pulled out one final document, a dated internal memo that made Alfredo's eyes widen slightly. "They made one crucial mistake, sir, and I think it's time we used it." The rain continued to fall outside, but inside Alfredo's office, the atmosphere had changed. Where there had been defeat, now there was purpose. Where there had been shock, now there was strategy. "Penny," he said, studying a surveillance photo of Wilson and Jasmine entering a private dining room at Lucirc, "call Heidi Houston in internal audit. Tell her I need to meet first thing Monday morning. And get me Marco Knight from legal." "Already done, sir." Penny's efficient smile held a hint of satisfaction. "They'll meet you at 7 a.m. at Café Laurent." Away from prying eyes. As Penny gathered the documents, Alfredo moved to his window, watching raindrops race down the glass. In their distorted reflections, he could see the past year playing out: Jasmine's gradual withdrawal, Wilson's calculated moves, the subtle shift in board member allegiances. He'd been too consumed by personal loss to see the professional threat forming around him. "Sir?" Penny paused at the office door. "There's something else you should know. Wilson's beach house? It's not just a private residence. It's listed as a company property for client meetings. He's been writing off personal trips as business expenses for months." Alfredo nodded slowly, his reflection in the window showing the first hint of a smile. "Thank you, Penny, for everything." "Of course, sir." She hesitated, then added, "They thought they were being clever, playing both personal and professional angles. But they forgot something important." "What's that?" "In chess, the queen might be the most powerful piece, but it's the overlooked pawns that often determine the game." After she left, Alfredo returned to his desk, pulling up his private email. He began composing messages to key board members, his fingers flying across the keyboard with renewed purpose. Wilson and Jasmine might have orchestrated an impressive betrayal, but they'd forgotten the first rule of corporate warfare: never underestimate a man with nothing left to lose. He worked through the weekend, building his counter-strategy piece by piece. Each document Penny had brought revealed new layers of deception, but also new opportunities. Wilson's carefully constructed plan had one fatal flaw. He'd assumed Alfredo would be too proud or too shocked to fight back. Sunday evening brought the distant purr of a Tesla returning. Alfredo watched from his study window as Wilson dropped Jasmine off. She looked tanned, relaxed, her weekend bag slung over her shoulder as she used her key to enter the house. The sound of her heels on the marble foyer echoed through the empty rooms. "Had a good weekend?" Alfredo called out, not moving from his study. Jasmine appeared in the doorway, her expression guarded. "Don't start, Alfredo. We both know this marriage has been over since the miscarriage. I'm just finally doing something about it. By sleeping with the man who's trying to take my job?" "Wilson has vision," she countered, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "He sees opportunities you're too conservative to pursue. The board sees it too. Next week's vote is just a formality." Alfredo turned to face her fully, noting how she unconsciously took a step back. "You're probably right about the marriage being over. But Jasmine?" He held her gaze steadily. "You might want to review the company's policies about interpersonal relationships between departments, especially when they involve directors and potential CEOs. Something flickered in her eyes, the first hint of uncertainty he'd seen. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all. Just giving some professional advice between colleagues." He turned back to his computer. "You might want to prepare for tomorrow's emergency board meeting. I hear it's going to be quite interesting." Jasmine's heels clicked rapidly as she left the study, her weekend bag bumping against the doorframe in her haste. Upstairs, doors slammed as she moved through their bedroom. Alfredo remained at his desk, calmly reviewing his presentation for tomorrow one final time. His phone buzzed with a text from Penny. "Everything's in place for tomorrow. Heidi and Marco are fully prepared." Alfredo sent back a simple thank you before shutting down his computer. Tomorrow would change everything, not just for him and Jasmine, but for the entire company. Wilson French had played a clever game, using personal betrayal to facilitate professional destruction. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed Alfredo would play by the old rules. The night settled around the house, shadows lengthening as Alfredo sat in his study, listening to Jasmine's movements upstairs. Each sound, drawers opening, hangers sliding, shoes dropping, marked another piece of their life together being packed away. But unlike Friday night, these sounds didn't wound him. Instead, they fueled his resolve. He pulled out his phone, sending one final email to Harold Gillespie, the current CEO. "Harold, regarding tomorrow's emergency board meeting, I have some concerns about marketing's recent performance that require immediate attention. I've prepared a comprehensive overview. You might want to have legal present." The reply came within minutes. "Understood. I've had my own concerns. See you at 9 a.m. sharp." Upstairs, Jasmine's footsteps had gone quiet. Through the study window, Alfredo could see her silhouette in their bedroom, phone pressed to her ear. No doubt warning Wilson about tomorrow's meeting. Let them prepare, he thought. Some betrayals couldn't be defended against. He opened his desk drawer one last time, looking at the ultrasound photo that had marked the beginning of their end. Tomorrow would bring a different kind of loss for Jasmine, one she'd orchestrated herself. The thought brought him no joy, only a grim sense of necessity. The night stretched ahead, promising little sleep but offering plenty of time to ensure every detail was in place. In 12 hours, the carefully constructed world Wilson and Jasmine had built would begin to crumble. And from its ruins, Alfredo would build something stronger, something lasting. Outside, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, indifferent to the human drama unfolding in their glow. Somewhere in those lights, Wilson French was probably celebrating what he thought would be his crowning achievement. By this time tomorrow, he'd learn an important lesson about the price of betrayal. Alfredo closed the ultrasound photo in his desk drawer for the last time. Tomorrow wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. The kind that could only be served in boardrooms and balance sheets, through careful preparation and perfect timing. The game was about to change, and only one player knew all the rules. Morning fog clung to the windows of Café Laurent, turning the bustling street outside into a gray blur. Alfredo Davidson arrived exactly at 7 a.m., choosing a corner booth that offered a clear view of both entrances. The coffee shop's early morning calm suited his purpose, far from Vertex Technologies' corporate politics and prying eyes. Heidi Houston, head of internal audit, was already waiting, her laptop open and a stack of folders arranged precisely on the table. Her wire-rimmed glasses caught the soft lighting as she looked up from her screen. "I've been expecting this meeting for weeks." "Have you?" Alfredo settled into the booth, nodding thanks to the waitress who immediately brought him his usual espresso. Wilson French's numbers never added up. Heidi's fingers tapped a steady rhythm on one particular folder. "But I needed someone at the executive level to take interest before I could launch a formal investigation." The bell above the cafe door chimed as Marco Knight entered, shaking raindrops from his umbrella. The company's lead counsel looked more suited for a courtroom than a coffee shop in his tailored pinstripe suit. He slid into the booth next to Heidi, his expression grave. "I hope you realize what you're about to undertake," Marco said, accepting a coffee from the waitress. "Going after Wilson French means taking on half the board." He's been quite persuasive with his vision for the company's future. "Show me everything," Alfredo replied, pulling out his own laptop. Heidi opened her first folder, spreading documents across the table. "The marketing department's ROI figures caught my attention 3 months ago. Look at these quarterly reports." She pointed to highlighted sections. "They're claiming a 300% return on the Asia-Pacific expansion, but when you cross-reference with actual market penetration, they're double-counting successes." Alfredo finished, scanning the numbers and hiding the failures under different cost centers. "Exactly." Heidi pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop. "Every major marketing initiative under Wilson's leadership shows the same pattern. They take credit for organic growth, inflate success metrics, and bury the failures in departmental overhead." Marco leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. "That's not the worst of it. Remember that beach house where Wilson took your wife this weekend?" He pulled out his phone, showing Alfredo a property listing. "It's registered as a company asset, supposedly for client meetings and corporate retreats." "But," Alfredo prompted, "but the only clients who've stayed there are Wilson's personal guests. He's been writing off everything, utilities, maintenance, even the wine cellar, as business expenses. I've got records of at least 6 different women he's entertained there, all company employees." The implications hung heavy in the morning air. Heidi pushed her glasses up her nose, a habit Alfredo recognized as her tell for having more to say. "There's something else," she said, pulling out another file. "Wilson's been systematically taking credit for your operational improvements. Remember the supply chain optimization project from last quarter? The one that saved us $12 million? Alfredo's voice was tight. "Marketing's reports show it as their initiative. They claimed the savings came from their innovative approach to vendor relationships. But I've got the original project documents with your signature, your team's analysis, everything." Marco's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his eyebrows rising. "Harold Gillespie just confirmed tomorrow's emergency board meeting. 9 a.m. Perfect timing," Alfredo said, his mind already mapping out the moves ahead. "Heidi, I need every irregularity documented, every false claim tracked back to its source. Marco, get me everything on the beach house, property records, expense reports, security footage if it exists." "Already done." Heidi patted her stack of folders. "I've been building this case since Wilson started pushing those inflated ROI numbers. The only thing I lacked was executive support to move forward. And now you have it." Alfredo took a sip of his espresso, noting how its bitterness matched his mood. "What about Bradley Fletcher? Will the CFO back these findings?" "Bradley's been asking questions about marketing's numbers for months," Marco confirmed. "He'll verify everything once it's presented formally. And there's more. Kirsten Pierce from HR reached out to me last week. Apparently, Wilson's relationship with Jasmine isn't his first indiscretion." The cafe had begun to fill with morning commuters, their chatter creating a buffer of white noise around the booth. Alfredo watched a young couple at the counter, noting how the woman leaned into her partner's space, their body language speaking of trust and connection. He pushed away thoughts of similar moments with Jasmine. "Wilson's getting sloppy," Heidi observed, organizing her documents into presentations. He thought having board support made him untouchable. "Started leaving paper trails." "No," Alfredo corrected. "He got arrogant." There's a difference. He pulled out his phone, showing them the text he'd received from Penny that morning. My assistant's been tracking his meetings with board members. He's convinced Jennifer McGrath and 3 others to back him for CEO. Marco's expression darkened. Jennifer's young, ambitious. Wilson probably promised her the COO position once he takes over, which makes this all the more critical, Alfredo said, standing. I need everything ready for tomorrow morning. Every claim documented, every number verified, every witness prepared to speak. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Alfredo's home office became a war room, with Penny coordinating between Heidi, Marco, and other trusted allies. By Sunday evening, they had assembled an ironclad case against Wilson French's machinations. Monday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, the weekend's rain giving way to clear skies. Alfredo arrived at Vertex Technologies an hour early, noting Wilson's Tesla already in its reserve spot. So, the Golden Boy was preparing his defense. The boardroom filled slowly. Harold Gillespie sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable as he reviewed the agenda. Jennifer McGrath, the board's youngest member, entered with Bradley Fletcher, their heads close together in whispered conversation. Other board members filtered in, the tension in the room building with each arrival. Wilson French strode in 5 minutes late, his weekend tan glowing under the fluorescent lights. He took his seat with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won, barely acknowledging Alfredo's presence. Jasmine slipped in moments later, choosing a seat far down the table, her eyes fixed on her tablet. Before we discuss succession, Harold began, his voice cutting through the murmurs, we have some concerns about marketing's recent reports. Wilson rose smoothly, adjustment his Italian silk tie. I'm happy to address any questions about my department's performance. As you'll see from our latest figures, actually, Alfredo interrupted, standing with his own presentation folder, I have some figures of my own to share. He nodded to Penny, who began distributing thick packets to each board member. These documents show a pattern of fraudulent reporting, misappropriation of company resources, and systematic deception. The room fell silent as board members opened their packets. Wilson's tan seemed to fade slightly as he glanced at the contents. Page 1 shows marketing's reported ROI figures for the past 6 quarters. Alfredo continued, his voice steady. Page 2 shows the actual numbers, verified by internal audit. Heidi stood, her laser pointer highlighting specific discrepancies. Marketing has been double-counting successes and concealing failures. The Asia-Pacific expansion, for example, shows a 300% return, but that includes organic growth from operations and inflated market penetration numbers. Bradley Fletcher, the CFO, leaned forward. These numbers match the irregularities my team flagged last quarter. We've been trying to reconcile these discrepancies for months. Wilson's chair scraped back as he stood. These are baseless accusations. Our department's success speaks for itself. The board has seen our results. Yes, let's talk about results, Alfredo cut in, moving to the next section. Marco, would you explain about the beach house? Marco Knight rose, his legal training evident in his precise tone. The property Mr. French has been using for personal entertainment is registered as a company asset. He's been writing off private trips as business expenses, including this past weekend's excursion. Jasmine's tablet clattered to the table. She quickly retrieved it, her hands shaking slightly. Furthermore, Marco continued, we have documentation of multiple inappropriate relationships with subordinates, all conducted at company expense. Kirsten Pierce from HR stepped forward, having entered silently during the presentation. My office has received several complaints about Mr. French's behavior, all properly documented and investigated. Wilson's confidence cracked. This is a witch hunt. Jennifer, you've seen our department's innovation firsthand. Tell them about the supply chain improvements. You mean these supply chain improvements? Alfredo clicked to the next slide, showing project documents bearing his signature. The ones my operations team implemented last quarter? The same ones your department claimed credit for? Jennifer McGrath, who had been growing paler with each revelation, cleared her throat. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in Wilson French's leadership. Wilson spun to face her, betrayal written across his features. Jennifer, we discussed this. The plan we made was based on lies, she finished, her voice firm. I won't stake my reputation on fraudulent numbers and unethical behavior. Jasmine stood abruptly. I need to clarify something. Wilson manipulated me, used our professional relationship to… Actually, Alfredo interrupted, pulling out his phone. He played a crystal-clear audio recording. Asterisk, you can't control who I sleep with. This marriage is just paper now. Wilson's taking me to his beach house. Asterisk. The silence that followed was absolute. Harold Gillespie stood, his authority filling the room. I believe we've heard enough. Bradley, please verify these numbers with internal audit. Kirsten, I want a full HR review on my desk by end of day. Marco, prepare the necessary documentation for termination proceedings. Wilson French, the man who'd planned to take everything from Alfredo, slumped in his chair. His perfect tan now seemed like a cheap facade, his expensive suit armor that had failed to protect him. This meeting is adjourned, Harold announced. The board will reconvene this afternoon to vote on succession planning. Mr. French, Mrs. Davidson, please wait in your offices for HR. As the board members filed out, Alfredo caught Jasmine's eye. For a moment, he saw past the betrayal to the woman he'd loved, the one who'd shared his dreams and his grief. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who'd chosen ambition over loyalty, deception over truth. Penny appeared at his side, efficiently gathering the presentation materials. Sir, legal needs your signature on several documents. Alfredo nodded, turning away from his wife's pleading look. The morning sun streamed through the boardroom's windows, illuminating the path ahead. He'd won this battle not through revenge, but through preparation, integrity, and the loyalty of people who valued truth over ambition. The corporate world might be built on paper, contracts, reports, and presentations, but it was sustained by something far more valuable: trust. Wilson and Jasmine had forgotten that fundamental truth, and now they would face the consequences of their choices. As he walked out of the boardroom, Alfredo felt no triumph, only a quiet certainty that justice, at least in this case, would be served through spreadsheets and documentation rather than dramatic confrontations. Sometimes, he reflected, the most decisive victories were won not with grand gestures, but with careful attention to detail and unwavering commitment to truth. Marco caught up with him at the elevator. The termination papers will be ready within the hour. And Alfredo? He paused, choosing his words carefully. That recording of Jasmine? Having a home security system that captures audio might raise some privacy concerns. Alfredo allowed himself a small smile. Except our system doesn't record audio. But they didn't know that, did they? The elevator doors closed on Marco's surprised laugh, carrying Alfredo toward his next challenge. The war wasn't over. There would be legal battles, PR challenges, and a company to rebuild. But for now, he had won the most crucial battle, the one for truth. In his office, Penny was already coordinating with HR and legal, her efficiency unmatched as she managed the aftermath of the morning's revelations. She handed him a fresh coffee without being asked, then paused. Sir, was it worth it? All the preparation, the waiting, building the case instead of confronting them immediately? Alfredo looked out at the city skyline, thinking of the weekend he'd spent alone in his house, knowing where his wife was, what she was doing, but choosing to wait, to build an irrefutable case instead of acting on emotion. In chess, he said finally, the winning move isn't always the most dramatic one. Sometimes it's the quiet move, the one your opponent dismisses as insignificant, that leads to checkmate. Penny nodded, understanding the layers in his response. The board reconvenes at 3. Shall I have Heidi prepare the operational overview you'll need as CEO? Yes, Alfredo replied, turning back to his desk. And Penny? Thank you. For seeing what they were planning, for gathering the evidence, for everything. Of course, sir. She paused at the door. Some people mistake kindness for weakness, loyalty for blindness. They forget that the strongest foundations are built on trust, not deception. As she left, Alfredo opened his laptop, ready to begin the work of rebuilding what Wilson's ambition and Jasmine's betrayal had tried to destroy. The morning's victory was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, transforming a moment of justice into lasting change. But that was tomorrow's battle. For now, He had termination papers to sign and a company to protect. The sun continued its climb into the morning sky, promising a day of reckoning for some and renewal for others. In the end, Alfredo reflected, every betrayal carried within it the seeds of its own destruction. Wilson and Jasmine had planted those seeds themselves, forgetting that in the corporate world, as in life, truth might be delayed, but it could never be permanently denied. The boardroom had fallen silent after the vote. 12 hands raised in unison, no abstentions, no dissenting voices. Harold Gillespie's gavel struck the polished mahogany table with quiet finality. The board unanimously confirms Alfredo Davidson as Chief Executive Officer of Vertex Technologies. Effective immediately, Harold's voice carried the weight of 25 years of leadership. Congratulations, Alfredo. The company is in your hands now. Alfredo stood, accepting handshakes and congratulations with measured grace. Through the glass walls, he could see Penny organizing documents at her desk, her efficiency undiminished by the morning's drama. On her computer screen, termination papers were already being formatted. Your first actions as CEO will set the tone, Harold murmured, lingering after other board members had filed out. Make them count. The leather of Alfredo's new chair creaked as he settled behind the CEO's desk. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the carpet. His laptop chimed with an incoming email from Marco Knight, the subject line reading, "Termination documentation, urgent." Penny appeared in the doorway, her tablet ready. "Sir, HR has the paperwork prepared for both Wilson French and Jasmine Fisher. Security is standing by." She paused, then added, "Jasmine is in her office, packing her personal items. Wilson hasn't left the conference room. Have security escort Wilson out first," Alfredo said, his pen hovering over the termination papers. "I want to handle Jasmine's departure personally." The scratch of his pen across paper echoed in the quiet office. Two signatures that ended not just careers, but a marriage and a betrayal. Through his window, he watched as security approached the conference room where Wilson sat, head in hands, his weekend tan now ashen under the fluorescent lights. Wilson's escort from the building was subdued. No dramatic protests, no scene. Just a broken man clutching a cardboard box of personal items, his Italian leather shoes scuffing against marble floors he'd never walk again. Jasmine's departure proved different. Alfredo found her in her office, the designer weekend bag perched on her desk as she methodically emptied drawers into it. The same bag she'd packed for her weekend with Wilson now held the remnants of her career. She looked up as he entered, her fingers tracing the bag's leather strap. "I suppose there's no point in offering explanations now." "No," Alfredo agreed, placing the termination notice on her desk. "The marriage may be paper, but so is your termination notice. They both tell their own stories." Security waited discreetly by the elevator as Jasmine walked out, her heels clicking one last time against the floors of Vertex Technologies. She didn't look back. The next weeks brought a flurry of changes. Penny sat across from Alfredo in what had been Wilson's office, now stripped of its pretentious modern art and restored to functional elegance. "The board approved all your restructuring proposals," she reported, her new title of Director of Operations sitting naturally on her shoulders. "Heidi Houston's promotion to EVP is official as of this morning." Alfredo nodded, reviewing the organization charts on his tablet. "And marketing?" "Morgan Galvin arrives from the West Coast office next week. Her preliminary audit of the department has already uncovered some interesting patterns." Penny pulled up an email on her tablet. She found evidence that Wilson attempted similar schemes at his previous companies. Never quite this bold, but the pattern was there. The marketing department's glass walls revealed a hive of activity as the restructuring took shape. Gone were the oversized egos and inflated numbers of Wilson's era, replaced by a culture of transparency and accountability that Heidi Houston insisted upon. Morgan Galvin proved to be a revelation. The former West Coast marketing director attacked her new role with surgical precision, her audit expanding beyond Wilson's tenure to root out any lingering issues. Wilson built his career on manipulation, Morgan explained during a late-night strategy session, her laser pointer highlighting suspicious patterns in historical data. He'd start small, taking credit for others' work, massaging numbers just enough to draw attention. By the time he made his big moves, he'd already conditioned everyone to accept his version of reality. Heidi nodded, her new EVP nameplate catching the light. Classic fraudster pattern. Start with small deceptions, build to larger ones. The same pattern showed up in his expense reports, his project claims, everything. The weeks turned to months. Spring faded into summer, then autumn. Vertex Technologies' stock price climbed steadily as market confidence grew in the new leadership team. 40% growth under Alfredo's first 6 months validated every decision, every change. One crisp October morning, Penny entered Alfredo's office with a stack of papers and a knowing look. The divorce papers arrived. Final version, ready for signature. She placed them on his desk beside another document, property records for a familiar beach house development. The board approved the acquisition? Alfredo asked, though he already knew the answer. Unanimously. The property's been undervalued since Wilson's scandal. It'll make an excellent corporate retreat center once renovated. A symbol of transformation, you might say. Alfredo signed the divorce papers with the same pen he'd used for the termination notices months ago. The parallel wasn't lost on him. Endings and beginnings marked in ink and legal language. His phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made him pause. Former marketing executive indicted for corporate fraud. Wilson's corporate past had finally caught up with him. Buried in the article was a familiar name. Jasmine Fisher, listed as a witness for the prosecution. Should we release a statement? Penny asked from the doorway, already anticipating his next move. Alfredo shook his head, turning to gaze out at the city skyline. The view from the CEO's office differed from his old corner space, wider, clearer, full of possibility. No need. We've moved on to bigger things. His eyes fell on the beach house acquisition report. The property that had hosted betrayal would soon serve a greater purpose, its renovation plans already taking shape. The irony didn't escape him, transforming a symbol of deception into a space for corporate renewal. The afternoon sun painted the city in shades of amber and gold. In the outer office, he could hear Heidi and Morgan discussing next quarter's projections, their voices confident and clear. Penny's desk housed a small plaque, Employee of the Year, earned through loyalty and competence rather than manipulation. Success, Alfredo mused, his fingers tracing the embossed nameplate on his desk, is the best revenge. The words hung in the air as he reviewed the latest acquisition proposals. Each document, each decision, each signature moved Vertex Technologies further from the shadows of betrayal into a future built on transparency and trust. In the end, Wilson and Jasmine's betrayal had given him something unexpected, not just a victory, but a vision. The company they tried to manipulate now stood stronger, its culture transformed, its future secure. Their deception had forced a necessary evolution, turning crisis into opportunity. The day wound down as autumn sunshine faded into dusk. Alfredo's calendar showed back-to-back meetings for the next week, strategy sessions, investor presentations, planning for the next quarter's growth. The rhythm of corporate life continued, but now it moved to a different beat. Penny appeared one last time, placing a final report on his desk. Sir? The renovation plans for the beach house are ready for review. The architects have some interesting proposals for the space. Alfredo smiled, understanding the symmetry of the moment. The property that had hosted secrets and lies would become a place of open dialogue and honest collaboration. Sometimes, he reflected, the best response to betrayal wasn't revenge, but renewal. As night settled over the city, lights flickered on in office buildings across the skyline. In one corner office, a CEO reviewed papers that would shape his company's future, each decision a step further from the shadows of the past. The view from the top had changed him as much as he'd changed the company. Not hardening him against trust, but teaching him to build it on stronger foundations. The ghosts of betrayal had faded, replaced by the solid reality of success. In the end, that was the truest victory. Not just surviving deception, but using it as a catalyst for transformation. Vertex Technologies stood taller now, its foundation stronger for having weathered the storm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new decisions. But tonight, in a corner office high above the city, Alfredo Davidson allowed himself a moment to appreciate the view. Success, he had learned, wasn't just about winning. It was about building something worth fighting for. The night deepened, but lights still burned in the CEO's office. There was work to be done, a future to build, a legacy to create. The best revenge, after all, wasn't just success. It was success that transformed betrayal into blessing, crisis into opportunity, endings into beginnings. And in that transformation lay the true measure of victory. Epilogue. 5 years later. The Manhattan courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations as Wilson French, once the golden boy of corporate marketing, stood for sentencing. His designer suits had given way to department store clearance wear, his carefully styled copper hair now streaked with premature gray. 5 years of legal battles had stripped away more than his fortune. They'd eroded the very confidence that had once been his trademark. Judge Eleanor Martinez adjusted her glasses, reviewing the verdict one final time. Mr. French, you've been found guilty of multiple counts of corporate fraud, embezzlement, and financial misrepresentation spanning 3 companies over 8 years. Your actions have destroyed careers, betrayed trusts, and undermined the very foundations of corporate governance. In the gallery, Jasmine Fisher sat rigid, her testimony as a state's witness having helped seal Wilson's fate. The years hadn't been kind to her either. After being blacklisted from major corporations following the Vertex Technologies scandal, she'd found herself working entry-level marketing positions at smaller firms, her prestigious career reduced to managing social media accounts for local businesses. The court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison, Judge Martinez continued, with an additional 5 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay restitution of $4.2 million to the affected companies and shareholders. Wilson's shoulders slumped as bailiffs approached. His eyes found Jasmine in the gallery, but she looked away, gathering her off-the-rack blazer and Target-bought handbag, a far cry from the designer pieces she'd once flaunted. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered around Heidi Houston, now CEO of Vertex Technologies. At 52, she carried the role with the same precision and integrity that had marked her tenure as EVP. Vertex Technologies has no comment on today's sentencing, she stated firmly. Our focus remains on our recent expansion into Asian markets and our upcoming Tech Innovation Summit. However, we believe justice has been served. Back at Vertex Technologies headquarters, now occupying 3 towers in the heart of Manhattan's financial district, Alfredo Davidson reviewed quarterly projections with his executive team. At 48, he transformed from the betrayed husband and executive into something more, a corporate legend known for turning the company's darkest moment into its greatest triumph. Morgan, walk us through marketing's numbers, he said, nodding to Morgan Galvin, whose restructuring of the department had become a Harvard Business School case study in corporate transformation. Morgan, now executive vice president of global marketing, pulled up a holographic display. Her reputation for ruthless transparency had made her both feared and respected across the industry. We're showing 300% growth in emerging markets, real growth, not the smoke and mirrors of the old regime. Every number triple verified by internal audit. Penny Carson, chief operating officer, smiled at the reference. Her rise through Vertex's ranks had inspired a mentorship program for administrative staff, turning support roles into leadership pipelines. Speaking of transparency, the Corporate Integrity Institute wants you to keynote their annual conference, Alfredo. Apparently, our governance model is becoming the industry standard. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the executive floor, catching the numerous awards lining the walls: Most Ethical Corporation, Innovation in Corporate Governance, Leadership Excellence. Each plaque marked another milestone in Vertex's journey from scandal to exemplar. Have you seen this? Penny asked, sliding her tablet across the table. A business news article showed Jasmine's latest venture, a small marketing consultancy operating out of a strip mall in New Jersey. The comments section brimmed with references to the Vertex scandal, ensuring her past followed every professional move. She applied for a position at Thompson Industries last month, Morgan added. They rejected her immediately. Some bells can't be unrung. Alfredo waved away the tablet. The past is the past. We have more interesting matters to discuss. He pulled up an image of the corporate retreat center, the renovated beach house property where his marriage had effectively ended. The Leadership Academy's first class graduates next week. 20 promising managers who'll carry our values to new ventures. The beach house's transformation mirrored Vertex itself, stripped of its dark history, rebuilt into something meaningful. Its modern conference rooms and training facilities had hosted hundreds of rising executives, each learning the real cost of ethical compromises through the property's own story. Later that evening, in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, Alfredo reviewed an email from Harold Gillespie, now enjoying retirement in the Berkshires. The old CEO still served as an advisor, his wisdom having helped guide Vertex through its post-scandal transformation. Saw the news about Wilson's sentencing, Harold wrote. Reminds me of something I learned over 40 years in business. Success built on deception is just failure in disguise. You turned their betrayal into a legacy of integrity. That's real success. A soft knock interrupted his reading. Catherine Chun, his wife of 3 years, entered with 2 glasses of wine. As head of the city's largest charitable foundation, she understood power, but unlike Jasmine, she wielded it with compassion rather than ambition. Rough day, she asked, noting the news articles on his screen. Just ghosts of the past being laid to rest, he replied, accepting the wine. Wilson's sentencing was today. 8 years. Catherine settled beside him, her presence grounding in its simplicity. They'd met at a corporate ethics panel, her foundation's work in transparency aligning with Vertex's reformed values. Their courtship had been deliberate, built on shared principles rather than passion alone. I ran into Jasmine last week, Catherine mentioned, her tone carefully neutral, at that small business convention in Newark. She's starting over again. 5th attempt, I think. She looked diminished. Alfredo nodded, unsurprised. Consequences have a way of compounding. Wilson's fraud conviction will make her reinvention even harder. No major corporation will touch anyone connected to that level of scandal. His phone chimed with a message from Marco Knight, still serving as Vertex's chief counsel. The legal team had just won another industry award for corporate compliance, their transparency protocols becoming the gold standard for multinationals. Remember that junior executive who tried Wilson's old tricks last month? Marco's message read, just submitted his resignation. Apparently, our ethics training videos, featuring a certain beach house, made quite an impression. Alfredo smiled, remembering the training program's centerpiece, a case study on Wilson and Jasmine's downfall, taught in the very rooms where they plotted their betrayal. Poetic justice had a way of coming full circle. The city lights sparkled beyond his window, a vastly different view from the one he'd had during those dark days 5 years ago. Vertex Technologies had grown beyond his wildest ambitions, its market cap now dwarfing its previous incarnation. But more importantly, it had become a testament to resilience, to the power of turning betrayal into breakthrough. His tablet showed another news alert. Wilson's perp walk, hands cuffed, heading for prison transport. The comments section filled with former colleagues and industry peers, each adding their own stories of his deceptions. 8 years would give him plenty of time to contemplate the true cost of betrayal. Jasmine's fall had been different, a slow descent into professional irrelevance. Her testimony against Wilson had spared her legal consequences, but earned her a different kind of sentence. In an industry built on trust and reputation, she'd become a cautionary tale, her name forever linked to corporate scandal and personal betrayal. The Leadership Academy Board approved your proposal, Catherine mentioned, reviewing her own emails. They want to expand the ethics program to satellite campuses. Apparently, there's a waiting list for the corporate governance workshops. The irony wasn't lost on him. The very property meant to host Wilson's triumph had become a temple to corporate integrity. Each year, hundreds of executives walked its halls, learning how ambition unchecked by ethics could destroy careers, marriages, and legacies. A final email arrived from Penny. Thought you'd want to know. Wilson's old marketing team at his previous company just reached out. They want to go through our compliance training. Apparently, his conviction sparked some soul-searching. Success, Alfredo reflected, wasn't just about winning. It was about winning in a way that transformed the battlefield itself. Wilson and Jasmine had sought victory through deception, only to become object lessons in its futility. Their betrayal had launched a movement toward corporate transparency that reached far beyond Vertex's walls. The night deepened over Manhattan, its skyline a testament to ambition realized and corrupted. Somewhere in that glittering landscape, Jasmine would be planning another fresh start. Wilson would be beginning his first night in prison, and countless others would be facing their own choices between integrity and expedience. But here, in the aftermath of betrayal, Alfredo had built something lasting. Not just a corporate empire, but a legacy of transformation. The company that emerged from scandal had become a beacon, proving that success and integrity weren't just compatible, they were inseparable. Catherine raised her glass in a quiet toast. To consequences, to choices, Alfredo amended, thinking of the paths that had led them all here. Wilson's choice to deceive, Jasmine's choice to betray, his own choice to rebuild rather than merely revenge. In the end, it wasn't just success that had proven the best revenge. It was success that transformed betrayal's bitter lessons into something noble, something lasting, something true. The price of betrayal had been high, but its dividends, measured in wisdom and integrity, would pay returns for generations to come. Outside his window, Manhattan's lights rivaled the stars, each one marking another story of ambition and choice, of triumph and betrayal, of consequences faced and lessons learned. But in his own story, Alfredo had written an ending that transcended revenge. He'd written a legacy. And that, more than any revenge, was the sweetest victory of all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.